Okay, I think you can go one more sutta. Number 68, Nalakapana Sutta at Nalakapana. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living in the Kosalan country at Nalakapana in the Palasa Grove. Now on that occasion, many very well-known clansmen had gone forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness under the Blessed One. The Venerable Anuruddha, the Venerable Nandya, the Venerable Kimbila, the Venerable Bagu, the Venerable Kundadana, the Venerable Revata, the Venerable Ananda, and other very well-known clansmen. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is talking about all these monks who come from well-known families, rich families. So these monks, because they have gone forth from well-known families, so everybody knows them. And on that occasion, the Blessed One was seated in the open, surrounded by the Sangha of monks. Then referring to those clansmen, he addressed the monks thus, "Monks, those clansmen who have gone forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness under me, do they delight in the holy life?" When this was said, those monks were silent. A second and a third time, referring to those clansmen, he addressed the monks thus, "Monks, those clansmen who have gone forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness under me, do they delight in the holy life?" For a second and third time, those monks were silent. Then the Blessed One considered thus, "Suppose I question those clansmen." Then he addressed the Venerable Anuruddha thus, "Anuruddha, do you all delight in the holy life?" And Anuruddha said, "Surely, Venerable Sir, we delight in the holy life." "Good, good, Anuruddha. It is proper for all you clansmen who have gone forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness to delight in the holy life. As you are still endowed with the blessing of youth, black-haired young men in the prime of life, you could have indulged in sensual pleasures, yet you have gone forth from the home life into homelessness. It is not because you have been driven by kings that you have gone forth from the home life into homelessness, or because you have been driven by thieves, or owing to that fear or want of a livelihood. Rather, did you not go forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness after considering thus, I am a victim of birth, aging and death, of sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair. I am a victim of suffering, a prey to suffering. Surely an ending of this whole mass of suffering can be known." Yes, Venerable Sir. So here the Buddha says, you all have gone forth also from prominent families, and you have not gone forth because you have been forced to go forth by the king, or owing to a debt, or of a want of a livelihood, not because you need to cari makan, but because you understand the Dhamma. What should be done, Anuruddha, by a clansman who has gone forth thus, while he still does not attain to the delight and pleasure that are secluded from sensual pleasures and secluded from unwholesome states, or to something more peaceful than that? Covetousness invades his mind and remains. Ill will invades his mind and remains. Sloth and torpor invade his mind and remain. Restlessness and remorse invade his mind and remain. Doubt invades his mind and remains. Discontent invades his mind and remains. Weariness invades his mind and remains. That is so while he still does not attain to the delight and pleasure that are secluded from sensual pleasures and secluded from unwholesome states, or to something more peaceful than that. When he attains to the delight and pleasure that are secluded from sensual pleasures and secluded from unwholesome states, or to something more peaceful than that, covetousness does not invade his mind and remain. Ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse, doubt, discontent, weariness do not invade his mind and remain. That is so when he attains to the delight and pleasure that are secluded from sensual pleasures and secluded from unwholesome states, or to something more peaceful than that. Stop here for a moment now. This is an extremely important part, extremely important sutta. Here the Buddha is saying, if a monk has not attained to the delight and pleasure that are secluded from sensual pleasures and secluded from unwholesome states. This refers to the first jhana. In the description of the first jhana, the Buddha says a monk has to be secluded from sensual pleasures and from unwholesome states before he enters the first jhana. So the Buddha says here that if a monk has not attained the first jhana, or to something more peaceful than that, something more peaceful than that refers to the higher jhanas. Jhana number 2, number 3, number 4, the arupas, and this cessation of perception and feeling. So this part the Buddha is saying, as long as a monk has not attained to the jhanas, these 5 hindrances invade his mind and remain. Covetousness, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse and doubt, and even discontent and weariness. But when he has attained to the first jhana or to higher jhanas, then these things, these hindrances, do not invade the mind and remain. So this is extremely important. So it is only when a monk attains the jhanas that he is rid of the 5 hindrances, and the 5 hindrances do not remain anymore. It's very clear from here, do not invade the mind and remain. It's very clear. It's not just during the time he's in jhana that he does not have the 5 hindrances. No, it's even after that, because here it's very clear that the 5 hindrances do not remain anymore after that. How then, Anuruddha, do you all think of me in this way? The Tathagata has not abandoned the taints that defile, bring renewal of being, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. That is why the Tathagata uses one thing after reflecting, endures another thing after reflecting, avoids another thing after reflecting, and removes another thing after reflecting. No, Venerable Sir, we do not think that the Blessed One, we do not think of the Blessed One in that way. We think of the Blessed One in this way. The Tathagata has abandoned the taints that defile, bring renewal of being, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. That is why the Tathagata uses one thing after reflecting, endures another thing after reflecting, avoids another thing after reflecting, and removes another thing after reflecting. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that before using anything, the Buddha will reflect. The Buddha, before he does anything, he reflects. Then he decides to use something. Or after reflecting, he endures another thing. Or after reflecting, he thinks it's necessary, he will avoid another thing. And after reflecting, he thinks it's best, then he removes another thing. So whatever we do, we have to reflect carefully. Don't do things blur. For example, some people, when they are all emotionally upset, then they cannot think straight. Then they are not reflecting, they are not thinking straight. How can they make the right decision? Then the Buddha said, Good, Anuruddha, the Tathagata has abandoned the taints that defile, bring renewal of being, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. He has cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, done away with them, so that they are no longer subject to future arising. Just as a palm stump whose crown is cut off is incapable of future growth, so too the Tathagata has abandoned the taints that defile, cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, done away with them, so that they are no longer subject to future arising. What do you think, Anuruddha? What purpose does the Tathagata see that when the disciple has died, he declares his reappearance thus, so and so has reappeared in such and such a place. So and so has reappeared in such and such a place. Venerable Sir, our teachings are rooted in the Blessed One, guided by the Blessed One. Have the Blessed One as their resort. It would be good if the Blessed One would explain the meaning of these words. Having heard it from the Blessed One, the monks will remember it. Anuruddha, it is not for the purpose of scheming to deceive people, or for the purpose of flattering people, or for the purpose of gain, honor, and renown, or with the thought let people know me to be thus, that when a disciple has died, the Tathagata declares his reappearance thus, so and so has reappeared in such and such a place, so and so has reappeared in such and such a place. Rather, it is because there are faithful clansmen, inspired and gladdened by what is lofty, who, when they hear that, direct their minds to such a state, and that leads to their welfare and happiness for a long time. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that after his disciples have passed away, he declares that they have been reborn in such and such a heaven, etc. Not because he wants to flatter people or deceive people or to get gains, honor or renown, but because the devotees, when they hear it, faithful clansmen, they will be inspired and gladdened, and they will direct their minds to such a state, and that will lead to their welfare and happiness for a long time. In other words, when they hear of the Buddha's disciples having attained certain stages or reborn in certain places, and then they are inspired to follow the same way. But only the Buddha has this capability of stating his disciples has attained to such and such a state. And nowadays, we don't have a monk who has that capability. So monks should not say that the disciples have attained such and such states. And the Buddha continues, here a monk hears thus, the monk named so and so has died. The Blessed One has declared of him. He was established in final knowledge. And when he has either seen that Venerable One for himself or heard it said of him, that Venerable One's virtue was thus, his state of concentration was thus, his wisdom was thus, his abiding attainments was thus, his deliverance was thus. Recollecting his faith, virtue, learning, generosity and wisdom, he directs his mind to such a state. In this way, a monk has a comfortable abiding. Here a monk hears thus. The monk named so and so has died. The Blessed One has declared of him. With the destruction of the 5 lower fetters, he has reappeared spontaneously in the pure abodes, and there will attain final Nibbana without ever returning from that world. In other words, an Anagamin. And he has either seen the Venerable One for himself, etc. He directs his mind to such a state. In this way, too, a monk has a comfortable abiding. Here a monk hears thus, the monk named so and so has died. The Blessed One has declared of him. With the destruction of 3 fetters and with the attenuation of lust, hate and delusion, he has become a once returner, Sakadagamin, returning once to this world to make an end of suffering. And he has either seen the Venerable One for himself, etc., etc., and he directs his mind to such a state. In this way too a monk has a comfortable abiding. Here a monk hears thus, the monk named so and so has died. The Blessed One has declared of him. With the destruction of 3 fetters, he has become a stream enterer, no longer subject to perdition, bound for deliverance, headed for enlightenment, a Sotapanna. And he has either seen the Venerable One for himself, etc., etc. He directs his mind to such a state. In this way too a monk has a comfortable abiding. So here the Buddha is talking about the monk disciples, the Arahant, Anagamin, Sakadagamin and Sotapanna, the various stages of Aryahood. And so if a monk hears of this other monk, then he is inspired and he will direct his mind to attain that same state also. Then the Buddha continues. Here a bhikkhuni, a nun hears thus, the nun named so and so has died. The Blessed One has declared of her. She was established in final knowledge, Miss Arahant, and she has either seen that sister for herself or heard it said of her. That sister's virtue was thus, her state of concentration was thus, her wisdom was thus, her abiding in attainments was thus, her deliverance was thus. Recollecting her faith, virtue, learning, generosity and wisdom, she directs her mind to such a state. In this way too a nun has a comfortable abiding. Similarly, when this nun hears of Anagamin, Sakadagamin, Sotapanna nun, then she is also inspired to follow. Here a man lay follower hears thus, the man lay follower named so and so has died. The Blessed One has declared of him. With the destruction of the 5 lower fetters, he has reappeared spontaneously in the pure abodes, and will there attain final Nibbana without returning from that world. Stop it for a moment. So just now the monk and the nuns, they can attain the four aryan fruitions, the Arahant, Anagamin, Sakadagamin, and Sotapanna. And the fourth fruit, third fruit, second and first fruit. But here you see for the layman, the highest is the Anagamin, destruction of the five lower fetters. He has reappeared spontaneously in the pure abodes. That refers to the Anagamin. So the layman follower generally cannot become an Arahant. And then similarly for the layman, hears of some other layman who's attained Sakadagamin and Sotapanna, and then he is also inspired to follow that way. And similarly, a woman lay follower hears thus: the woman lay follower named so and so has died. The Blessed One has declared of her, with the destruction of the five lower fetters, she has reappeared spontaneously in the pure abodes and will there attain final Nibbana without ever returning from that world. In other words, also become an Anagamin, and so she is also inspired. Similarly, when she hears about another lay woman follower who has attained Sakadagamin and Sotapanna, so she will be inspired to follow that. So Anuruddha, it is not for the purpose of scheming to deceive people, or for the purpose of flattering people, or for the purpose of gain, honor and renown, or with the thought, let people know me to be thus, that when the disciple has died, the Tathagata declares his reappearance thus, so and so has reappeared in such a place, and so has reappeared in such and such a place. Rather, it is because there are faithful clansmen inspired and gladdened by what is lofty, who, when they hear that, direct their minds to such a state, and that leads to their welfare and happiness for a long time. That is what the Blessed One said. Remember, Anuruddha was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So that's the end of the sutta. So this sutta, the most important part, is that section 6, where the Buddha says, as long as a person has not attained to the jhanas, then the five hindrances will invade the mind and remain. But when a person has attained to the jhanas, then the five hindrances do not invade the mind and remain. The important word is remain. It does not remain anymore. No. Okay, we stop here. Anything to discuss? I can't tell you exactly why the Buddha does not mention the destruction of the 10 fetters for the Arahant, but in some other sutta, it is clear that the Buddha mentioned that the Arahant has destroyed the 10 fetters. But these 5 lower fetters, they are coarser fetters. Those, the 5 higher fetters, are very fine fetters. Only the Arahant can eliminate. Can you speak louder? Fetters. In the Vinaya books, when the Buddha talks about a meal, he talks about soft food and hard foods. Generally, all foods. Only there are certain exceptions to that. So, the Buddha himself practiced one meal a day. So later, because some monks found it hard, then the Buddha said, after you take your main meal, if you want, you can set some aside and eat later. So, because the Buddha ate one meal, it's mentioned he eats in one session or one sitting. So there are some forest monks, like in some forest monasteries in Thailand, they only eat one meal a day. So breakfast is actually considered a meal. Lower. No, there's no such thing. Where did you hear that? Not in the sutta, as far as I know.
In temple, I usually 2 months usually to do that, and I usually the right one for my one of the right. I do that the one for Lana, and I eat like more Lana after shift. Many countries
I can't tell you about the statues because I'm not interested in statues. Okay, shall we end here?